Okay, so really quickly, I'm going to run through the PTR just change by change so everybody knows what's going on, so we're not just jumping around really quickly. We're only going to mention in terms of balance rather than small game fixes, but I will get to one quick game fix that I had a problem with that seems pretty random. But anyway, unit vision up ramps has been reduced by 1, basically meaning that holding a ramp advantage is a lot more beneficial to you, and it also decreases the likelihood of somebody warping in on your ramp past a force field in Protoss versus Protoss. So that was an interesting change. Immortals got an attack range increase from 5 to 6. Mothership acceleration increased basically so that it doesn't really have an acceleration. And the Mothership's cloaking field also changes, or whoops, excuse me. The Mothership's cloaking field does not cloak units instantaneously, but rather adds a lag to the cloak field time. It seemed like more of a graphical problem than anything, but not that people really use motherships anyway for the cloaking. Stalker, the blink research time was increased from 110 to 140, which is actually a pretty interesting change. Warp prism shields were increased from 40 to 100. As far as Terrans go, build time of bunkers, or excuse me, build time of barracks increased from 60.
So used to saying bunkers.
I know. Build time of the barracks was increased from 60 to 65. As we talked about, the Hellions got nerfed on their pre-igniter, which is Blue Flame upgrade. The damage is decreased from 10 to 5. At least the damage increased, so that's a really weird thing to say. The Seeker missile movement was increased, as we mentioned before. As far as Zerg, the fungal growth damage was changed by just a little bit, by 6 to non-armored and 8 to armored, is essentially what that breaks down to. They had some weird terminology. I figured I'd just do the regular math. And the Overseer had a couple of changes. Only cost 50 gas instead of 100 gas to morph an Overseer. Contaminate was reduced down to 75 instead of, or excuse me, it was increased to 125 as opposed to being 75 as it was before, which I'm sure goes right along with the gas change. And lastly, the Ultralisk build time was decreased from 70 seconds to 55. So
awesome.
Quick little, or rather a quick overview of all the changes that are going to be coming out in the patch, at least based upon what they get in the PTR. And again, I believe only if you're in the US, you can go to where the Starcraft launch folder is, and you can open up the public test realm, make an account on there, and play Starcraft on the test realm so instead of the regular game. So they obviously appreciate all the feedback they get from everybody, because those are going to dictate what the final changes are. So these changes aren't necessarily final yet, but for the most part, they are.
Usually, changes that involve maps will change pretty consistently on the PTR, but changes like this, they might tweak them a little bit, but these are the things that they have stated they want to change with this patch, with these patch notes. So I wouldn't expect them to change too drastically, but they might change a little bit.
Yeah, I don't think so either. So really quickly, let's jump into, I think this was a pretty favorable patch for Protoss. In particular, the attack range on the Immortal was increased by 1, which seems
Lizard.
Which seems
I'm writing love notes for that one.
it seems kind of insignificant, but I think clearly it was to deal with roaches, considering they really abuse roaches' lack of range right now. And so if your Immortals get mixed into your Stalker army, it will make it so they can still fire, as opposed to just like running around and bumping into each other.
It was also an issue with force fields. If you force field your roaches back, your stalkers could hit them, but your immortals couldn't.
Yeah.
Unless your immortal was right up front.
Yeah, and I think... Go ahead.
Even as a Terran player, I have to agree, that is a needed change for Protoss.
One other thing that I don't think many people are thinking about is the way it's going to interact versus Colossus. If my math is correct, I believe a non-range Colossus is actually only 6. So that'll be the same as the Immortal. So you could probably hit some weird Immortal timings in PvP now, or perhaps they're more viable in the late game. I guess time will tell, but that's the other thing that I don't think I see many people mentioning here in the threads that are up for it.
I've actually been seeing, well, just personally in my PvP, I've been playing a lot of custom melees lately, more so than the ladders, just to get a wide range of player skills. And a lot of the things I've been seeing in PvP is instead of actually going for Colossus, they've been going for early Immortals and then adding on some Void Rays later. And it's actually really scary. I've had it beat me when I actually go heavy Colossus on like even 2 bases to their 1, like, and not even with a timing issue. Like I can deflect an attack with 2 bases when they 1 base me, and then they'll still outproduce me later by taking a later second, but they have that number on me. It's almost like a Zerg overwhelmment. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and I've been in that same situation before, but in pre-patches and everything like that. It really comes down a lot to positioning more than anything, and I think Protoss versus Protoss is kind of winding up a little bit more like the Terran mirror, which is great because I think the Terran mirror is probably the best mirror matchup in the game. Somebody's
That's
got
a
a
cell
telephone. Guess we know who it was. Yeah, so that's another aspect I don't think many people saw when they changed it. Basically, its best change overall is just going to be so it's not bumping around into your stalkers, so you can mix them into stalker-heavy armies a little better. So I think that was a nice change.
Oh, sorry about that, guys. Freaking ad about gave me a heart attack.
So, yeah, basically the Immortal change was pretty good. One thing that I haven't seen addressed a lot either is the blink research time. People have just kind of passed it over as, well, it's the same as charge now, so who really cares? Any quick thoughts on that?
Blink, there's not much I love more than Blink Stalkers, to be honest. If I had to sell my kidneys to keep playing with them, I would consider it, and it makes me sad, but at the same time, I don't think it's going to break them. There wasn't really any weird blink timings. Like, if you're going to go 3-gate Blink Stalker or something like that off one base and try to rush the timing on it, yeah, you weren't going to win the game right there.
I actually kind of disagree with that.
Really?
Yeah, there was a build floating around that was just one of those little calculated builds to see how quickly you could get stuff done. And it looked cool, so I picked it up. And if you ran it correctly, you could actually really abuse a Terran that was going for something that was either not very safe or going for a quick 1-1-1 opening, and you could get there with like 9 Blink Stalkers at about 6:20 was the vague time. You could really get there in about 6:25. And
now how would that
go ahead?
How would that build fare against that new that one base all-in that's floating around, like the 1-on-1?
That is the one base all-in, and it would absolutely demolish it.
It would dominate it. Like, it wouldn't even be close.
Early on, the only way you can defend... That is essentially a 4-gate with Blink. And the only way you can defend against a 4-gate is to have your tanks in a good position where the Stalkers can't shoot them, so they can actually deal the damage while your Marines tank the damage. And with that build, you would be able to blink up onto the tank and kill it easily, and then the game would be over. So it would completely hard counter that build.
Yeah, and it's actually pretty good against other standard barracks openers. It has like a little bit of a struggle with a 2 racks pressure. 3 racks, you'd be in a really close fight. It would depend on where the fight took place.
I can see it struggling with Marauder slow. Any kind of thing like that. I mean, Blink gets away from Marauder slow, but Marauders just do a lot of damage straight up.
It just made it come down to all the battles relying completely on your micro. And in like the 4 or 5 games that I ran it, I loved it. Like, it was perfect. It was a perfect counter to that 1-1-1, and it could handle any early pressure and stuff. It was kind of all in the sense that you wouldn't actually put a stalker out until about 4:30 or so, and it was a really goofy timed build. But if you ever wanted a direct counter build to that 1-1-1 play, that would just demolish it. And that extra 30 seconds on there is actually a pretty big deal for that. It would slow you down quite a bit. So
Honestly, I think that build's pretty recent, and I think maybe Blizzard took notice and was just like, whoa, that's too powerful.
Yeah, they could have, because the build actually puts out, I don't know if I mentioned the number before, but it was 9 Blink Stalkers by about 6:20. And
that's more than a 4-gate will have.
Yeah, if you can hit those timings, that's actually insane with Blink. So I don't know what really spawned that, considering I don't think there was ever a problem with the Blink timings before. But I thought it was particularly interesting that as soon as that surfaced and people started giving it a little bit of runtime, it's a really hard build to pull off, I'll admit that much. But
is that the one with the weird chrono timing at the start? Like, you chrono before your pylon or something like that?
No, it's still a 9 pylon. I'll give you the quick rundown of the build just by memory. It's 9 pylon, 14 gateway, and then you take double gas, and then your 17 pylon, 18 cybernetics core. You actually don't produce a stalker until after your Twilight Council's down. So
Oh,
you start.
guys, that's dirty.
Yeah. It's
Because,
clearly.
like, as a Terran, scouting just what you've said, I'm sorry to interrupt you, but scouting just what you've said, I would immediately think DTs or Void Rays. I would never think Blink Stalkers.
Yep.
But what you produce in those situations is a missile turret, bunker, Marines.
Yeah.
So that murder it.
Yeah, most definitely. So the rest
absurd.
of the builds, basically, your second gateway goes down at 21. Your third gateway would go down at 24 after you start your first stalker. You cut probes at 22, and your 3 chronos you'd have saved up would be on all 3 of your gateways before they're actually transformed into warp gate. So you'd chrono out 3 stalkers, transform to warp gate, and then your first warp in would give you the 9. And if you could warp in those last 3 next to their base, it was really, really strong.
So this is going to be the nerdiest thing that ever fell out of my mouth, and I'm talking worse than the time I swallowed an Archie magazine. But my clanmate had this program that runs genetic algorithms to test the fastest ways to get specific units with specific parameters and all that crap. And he found this scary way to pump out, I think it was 9 stalkers, but it was much earlier. It was like the same time as Warp Tech. Like you would show up at their door with about 7 stalkers before Warp Tech finishes on a 4-gate build. And then you'd have 3 gates to warp in 3 more, and it was scary as hell, but it didn't have blink. Now, your timing hits with blink like a few seconds later, and I can imagine how scary that would be, and your story alone makes me agree with this blink research nerf.
Yeah, so I actually wonder if it was just a direct change to that, because that's the only thing that I ever seen really exploiting blink that hard. And you can see blink stuff in PvP. You'd probably die with that in PvP just because of the timings.
You know what would actually, it also makes sense that nerf came about because of that build is the unit vision up ramps.
Yeah.
That also has something to do with it.
Yeah, and of course a lot of these nerfs, or rather changes, will need to have corresponding changes just to compensate for where they might get too powerful. But that's the only thing that I could possibly see would inspire them to change the blink research time.
What you just said about the connection to the ramps made me go back to the pre-igniter nerf that you were talking about, and you were saying maybe they nerfed it for the wrong reason, but if you actually look at all the maps that are coming out, all the nerfs that are happening, I think Blizzard is really, really, really pushing for a late game. They don't want any quick endings. And as you were saying in MLG, 2 Hellions were ending the game, and any early ramp aggression is now shut down with these ramp nerfs and the lack of blink and things like that. And I think that's literally what it is. Like, they're going all over the place. They're encouraging play for late game. You're seeing buffs to Ravens. You're seeing buffs to Ultralisks, a nerf to Infestors, which was stopping players from even going to Tier 3 as Zerg, because Infestors just did the trick.
The Barracks nerf. That nerfs the 2 racks.
Yes, it does. So
that's what we're seeing, is we're seeing a nerf to early aggression.
I would agree with
so
that.
Not so much early aggression, but early game endings.
Yeah, and again, it goes back to our point about whether these changes are based upon viewership or if it's based upon play. Because if you go back and watch the first season of GSL, it was awful because everybody cheesed. Everybody cheesed really hard, and I believe
that's because people didn't understand the game, right? Nobody knew how to play a proper macro game. So, and when someone I know this one guy who he says he loves it when someone cheeses him because it tells him that he knows that they can't macro as well as him. So if he defends the cheese, he knows he's going to win because he can out macro them hands down.
Yeah, so
and I think it's true.
Yeah, so
that is true. I don't know if y'all have had encounters with random players, and I don't mean to disrespect any random players, but as a Terran, when you go onto the ladder and you see a random, you have to expect cheese. And so whenever I see a random player and I see that it's not cheese, I'm usually confident in my ability to win in the late game. And I think it's pretty much the same reason.
It's pretty much the same. Yeah, when I see a random player, I almost always counter cheese. Like I go for some stupid proxy racks or cannons, because you're automatically at a disadvantage when you see a random player, because as Protoss, for example, you have to assume they're Zerg, so you have to wall, and you don't want to wall against Terran or Protoss, and so you have to wall assuming they're Zerg. Plus, you have to scout right away, so you're short a probe, and it's brutal. And so
it's really funny that you say that, because in my games, I'm Terran. We also have to wall, and if they're Protoss, what are they going to do? If you see a Terran walling, they're going to go Void Race. So it's like, pretty much you instantly know what they're going to do, which is kind of nice. But at the same time, yeah, I agree. They have kind of an advantage right off the